Hi, Cadence. I was just looking at the color comp that you submitted for the final project. It's a really good start. It's a fun design. The fish and the coral, always fun. Um, there are a few suggestions. I did notice your comments about the colors. You want to make the fish and not be blue and blend in so much with the background. You wanted to add some more sea life and things like that. I think those are all really good things that you were thinking about, and I'm glad that you were able to figure that out with your own design. A few other things that I want to point out just to get you thinking. First of all is uh, let's see. So like the fish right now is swimming and it's pointed in toward the left. And you might consider flipping that around, and I'll tell you why. So that he's swimming in the other direction. Typically, especially in American society, when we read from left to right, and so that's a normal tracking for the eye. And so, but it also has a more positive connotation, like, you're moving forward, and it's because that's how we track. But when we go from left to right, we're moving forward rather than when we go from right to left, we're moving backward. And so it's just a subtle thing, and it's something that you may not even think about, but it does make a difference in design. To track the eye from left to right. And so the fish is the focal point. And so we're going to want to, it's almost like it's telling a story. Where is he going? Is he going forward or is he going backward? Maybe he's going back to find his mom. Maybe he, you know what I mean? Like Finding Nemo, or is he going out on an adventure? Those can all of that can you can get just from the simple orientation of which direction the fish is swimming. So that's just something to think about. Another thing, I think you've got a really fun color scheme going on um, with the blues, reds, greens. It's an analogous color scheme. I want you to steer away from using gray on major shapes. It's on the rubric. And the reason why it's there is so that you can learn how to harmoniously mix colors without relying on neutral colors. Okay, so those are two things. So what I want you to do is I want you to add more detail to your focal point. You've got it in the rule of thirds right here as it is. To really create a focal point, you need to add some value contrast, some color contrast, even saturation contrast or color temperature contrast is another way to draw attention to a focal point. And what I want you to do is I want you to add some more detail, not only color, and I'd be okay if you wanted to. You could go a warm color, break away from your color scheme just a bit, just to create that accent in the design. But if you want to stick with your analogous color scheme, then that would be just fine too. I wanted to just show you I did a Google search. I like to do this with my students, so just to get them thinking. It's okay to do this to get ideas as long as you're not copying. I think it's just fine. But I wanted to show you how you can add some detail to a fish using simple shapes. And so and some of these fish have interesting shapes. There are others that you can Google. I had some pulled open before that were really interesting. But just look at the different kinds of shapes, that you can get from a fish, and how you can use simple shapes to create a fish. And so you've got a great thing going on here. You've taken some of those ideas. You've got a pretty interesting shape already, but maybe just adding a little bit of detail to your fish. Like the rainbow fish, you can add some scales. Might be interesting. You can do that with line work, or you can do that with overlapping shapes, cutting out some of the shapes, like for example, like they do in this story, might be an interesting detail. I also want you to think about your background negative space and how you can break that up. You know, you might think, you know, the fish is swimming in the water. There's not a whole lot there. It's just water. I like how you're starting to think about breaking those up with this plant life, and I want you to push that just a little bit further. Here are just some examples that I can't remember. Aquarium graphics is what I searched. But look at how interestingly these shapes are broken up in the background. A lot of them use like an underground kind of atmospheric perspective. As you know, we're looking through the water, so as things move away from us, they will get lighter, just like in the atmosphere. They'll get lighter in value. Saturation will decrease as things are further away. Generally in water, they'll get cooler, more blue as they go back in space. And so I want you to think about how you can break up some of that background space. Here's another thing to consider. Things with like these fish, for example. This fish looks farther away because this one is overlapping it for one thing, but it's also lighter in value and less saturation. And see how you can create kind of a layering effect, you know, even this greenery through here. You can create a layering effect by doing that, by making some of your shapes closer to the background value or the background color. It gives it that feeling of depth. And then I wanted you to look at just some of these, just more of like these, just how they broke up and how they did this layering. Just something I found. You mentioned you kind of wanted a light source coming in. I haven't looked at all of these, but just give you some ideas that way. I think these were kind of the same things. And then just some interesting shapes for plant life. I'm not saying, you know, this color scheme is what you're doing, but just creating some nice overlapping, interesting shapes with the plant life as well. So those are my suggestions that I have for your moving on with your final. Just make it a little bit more interesting. Keep in mind the depth that you can create using color, saturation, and value, and then really make this focal point stand out. Like I said, you know, the blue does, if you really want it to stand out, you might have to go with a warm color. Just to give it that contrast, especially because you are using, you know, unless you made everything else blues and greens and then you made your fish, you know, this purple color. You don't want it to, you don't want some of the coral or plant life that you're going to create to compete with the focal point. And you can do that with saturation. You can make the fish very, very saturated and then desaturate some of the other plant life. That would work too if you wanted to stick with like a purple or some kind of contrast. The purple just has more contrast in general just because it's a little bit warmer because it has the red in it. And so those are just some things to think about, and I think you've got a great start, a fun design, and I like how you're thinking. And those are just some suggestions. Make sure with your final that you don't have any streaks in the paint, that everything is flat. And then be sure to look at the rubric as well. This is no white or black, gray. This is no browns, pretty much, or muddy colors. You're doing pretty good there though. Effective use of color, saturation, placement in the rule of thirds, running some shapes off the format which you have. And so I think you're doing some really good things. This is just something you might want to consider looking at before you hand it in to make sure that you meet all the criteria. So, okay, Cadence, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this class, and I look forward to seeing what you do for the final. All right, bye-bye.